All right, thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the July 11th meeting of the Site Plan Review Committee meeting to consider this site plan for Crystal Plaza 5. Tonight, we are considering topics such as the building architecture, open space, landscaping. Next meeting, we will be considering transportation, streetscape, parking, community benefits, green building program, and construction phasing and other items, as well as feedback and follow-up from tonight's meeting. Before we get things started, we do want to go over some ground rules before we get into the presentations and then the discussion. So as we get started here, my name is James Schroll. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, and I am chairing the site plan. For the safety of our SPRC members, county staff, members of the public, and other commissions who are participating in tonight's meeting. We're all joining tonight virtually. All participants are joining us remotely. We are legally authorized to hold this virtual meeting based on the governor's executive orders, legislation adopted by the Virginia General Assembly, and the County Board's Continuity of Operations Ordinance adopted in March 2020. As this is a virtual meeting, I'd like to orient everybody into how the virtual environment operates and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will run. Tonight's meeting is available to join from the calendar invitations Microsoft Teams link, the SPRC webpage, and the county's events calendar, and at the top of tonight's agenda. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone number for anybody who wishes to use it, and if you lose internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, we ask that you reconnect with us by phone. Please mute your phones and devices until you're called upon to speak. Phones that are nearby can also interfere with cause interference. For anybody who's joining us via Teams, please turn off your video feed. I'll address when to turn it on here in a moment. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located at the bottom of your command bar. The moderator, myself, I don't have the ability to do that, and neither does staff. The meeting chat is active to serve three purposes. One, for participants who need technical assistance. Two, for attendees to pose brief clarifying questions to the larger audience. While this will be monitored, it may not be formally acknowledged by staff or members of the LRPC. And finally, for members of the public who are not members of the SPRC who wish to register to make public comment. If you're interested in making public comment, you need to type that into the chat function. The meeting chat should not be used for discussion or any inappropriate statements. Anybody wishing to make a public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve that opportunity. All statements, public statements, will need to be shared verbally for the public record during assigned public testimony periods. We hope to be done around 9 o'clock tonight. If we're kind of concluding some remarks and discussion, we might go a little over, and we hope we have the flexibility to do that. For members of the LRPC, in addition to fellow planning commissioners, we are joined by representatives of some of the surrounding civic associations, in addition to members of other county advisory commissions. If SPRC members wish to be recognized, please turn your video feed on or raise your virtual hand. I will use these indicators to identify who wishes to speak. Once you've been recognized, please unmute yourself. Once you have concluded your remarks, please turn off your video feed and lower your virtual hand and turn off your video and mute yourself again. Is anybody who's joining us tonight who doesn't have Teams but is just joining us by telephone?
Commissioner Scholl, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Tenley Peterson. I am Commissioner Tenley Peterson. I'm having trouble getting into the meeting. I'm using the link from the email. That's not working. I used the link from the calendar. That didn't work. I didn't see a link on the actual SPRC project page, so I'm calling in. I don't know if it's just my computer having trouble or if other people are missing from the meeting tonight as well via Teams.
Commissioner Peterson, thank you for letting me know. Mr. Cullen, I too had some trouble joining tonight's meeting. I was able to do so, but I believe you had sent me a link as the chair of this meeting, and that worked for me. And the links, I don't believe the link I used was the one from the meeting website.
We did have someone that just commented that they had some issues, but they were able to join through their phone app. I know that sometimes it's more successful for me. So I think the link is valid. I don't have an alternative other than if anyone would like, I can try to forward it directly.
Okay, if people are having trouble, Mr. Cullen's email address is in the staff report. It is on the, if you hover over Mr. Cullen's name from the SPRC webpage, you see his email address and you can email him if you're having trouble. It is mcullen@arlingtonva.us. That's Cullen with 2 L's. M. Cullen. Okay, well, we hope folks can join us. Thank you, Mr. Cullen. So concluding remarks here, and then we'll get started. For members of the public, as I noted, it's my intention to have public comment at the end of the meeting. Please type your desire to give public comment into the meeting chat. We will be monitoring that during the course of the meeting, and we'll be doing public comment at the conclusion of the meeting. Please do not raise your hand, but just please type your desire to do that into the meeting chat. Lastly, this is a public forum, and tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the county's website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. So with that out of the way, I'd like to do some brief introductions of SPRC members before we turn it over to staff and the applicant for presentations. So I'd like to start with members of the SPRC. Again, my name is James Schroll. I'm a member of the Planning Commission. If members of the SPRC can raise their hands, we can do it that way. You can raise your virtual hand, that'd be great. All right, well, let's start with Commissioner Lantelmi.
Good evening, this is Jim Lantelmi, and I'm a member of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Lantelmi. Ms. Van Hine.
Hi, Pam Van Hine, representing the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Hine. Chairman Slatt.
Chris Slatt, representing the Transportation Commission.
Thank you. Ms. Freshman.
Judy Freshman, Crystal City Civic Association.
Thank you. Ms. McIntyre.
Joan McIntyre, representing Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre. Mr. Dowell.
Hi, Michael Dowell, representing the Crystal City Citizens Review Council.
Thank you. Mr. DeVonzo.
Hi, Ben DeVonzo, representing Aurora Highland Civic Association.
Thank you. Commissioner Ware, or Chairman Ware.
Daniel Weir, with the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Weir. Mr. Manuel.
I'm Kevin Manuel, representing the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Manuel. Alex Venable.
Hi, we've got Kedrick Whitmore and Alex Collette here from Venable.
Thank you to you both. Just a reminder to folks to just lower your virtual hand after you've introduced yourselves. Let's now go to staff. All right, Mr. Cullen.
Hi, again, I'm Michael Cullen. I'm with the Department of Community Planning and Housing Development's Planning Division, and I'm coordinating the staff review for this project.
Great, thank you. Mr. Kreider.
Good evening. Chris Kreider. I'm the supervisor for the urban design section and working with Michael on the review of this project.
Thank you. Mr. Matusik.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Matusik with the Planning Division.
Thank you. Are there other members of staff here that, oh, Mr. Ewert? Or Ewert?
Ewert, but thank
Ewert,
you. Yes,
apologies.
my name is Max.
This is name. Yeah, this is last.
Are you done on the phone? No, I'm gonna take myself off camera or on camera. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Ewert. I am with the Department of Parks and Recreation.
You want no good?
Thank you. Just a reminder to folks, if you're not speaking, please mute yourselves. We're getting some background noise. Thank you. Thank you. Other members of staff that I've missed. Okay, so tonight we will be doing going through a staff presentation and then presentation by the applicant, and then we will have time for discussion among the LRPC members, and then we will be leaving time for public comment. We're going to hold all the questions as we always do until we get through both the staff presentation and the presentation by the applicants. And with that, I'd like to pass it off to Mr. Cullen.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. So once again, I am Michael Cullen with the CPHD Planning Division. This presentation will provide a brief introduction to the Crystal Plaza 5 site plan project and provide a summary of planning guidance and outstanding issues relative to the agenda for tonight's SPRC meeting. To find out more about the project, as mentioned before, and to review the current site plan drawings and application materials, please visit the project webpage at the URL located at the bottom of the screen. So in this presentation, we will include a brief introduction to the site location and project, and as I mentioned, we'll outline policy guidance and outstanding issues related to tonight's topics of building form, architecture, and open space. So the proposed project site is located at the southeast corner of Block M in the Crystal City neighborhood, which bookends the block with the Crystal Plaza 1 project that was approved in 2021. The site is currently occupied by the Crystal Plaza 5 office building and one-story retail shops along Crystal Drive. The site plan proposal includes 2 new residential towers with ground floor retail at a total density of 12.0 FAR. It includes 2 dedicated public open spaces, including an interim portion of the 23rd Street Plaza known as Open Space 10 and Open Space 11 that is proposed as a public plaza extending from Crystal Drive. And the applicant also proposes a new north-south connection that provides parking and loading access located between the 2 towers. The project would bring the site grade down to the sidewalk level along Crystal Drive and 23rd Street. And in so doing, it would relocate the existing Crystal City underground entrance from 23rd Street to the north side of the site at the end of the proposed Open Space 11 Plaza. I will also note on this slide that the Crystal Plaza 6 building is located west of the subject site, also known as the We Work, We Live building. Redevelopment of that site is necessary to implement both the future Clark Bell Street alignment on this portion of the block and deliver the remaining area necessary to realize the full 23rd Street Plaza park space. So each of the 2 new buildings has been designed by a different architect. The 223 building on 23rd Street wraps around the new interim open space area and would contain approximately 613 units with over 4,300 square feet of ground floor retail. And that's in addition to retail space that has been added behind the open space. Both buildings are 30 stories with building heights slightly greater than 300 feet. Both buildings are also proposed to obtain a minimum LEED Gold certification. The 2250 building is the larger of the two, located at the corner of Crystal Drive and 23rd Street, and it would contain over 800 units and approximately 13,000 square feet of ground floor retail. Proposed parking for both buildings is 0.3 spaces per unit, with parking located both in underground garage structure that will be rebuilt on site, as well as a proposal to allow off-site parking located in an existing parking garage that's directly across Crystal Drive. The GLUP map designation for the site highlighted here is High Office Apartment Hotel, which outlines a base density range of up to 4.8 FAR for apartments and 3.8 FAR for office and hotel uses. The site is also located in the Crystal City Coordinated Redevelopment District with 2 locations for public space identified. The site is currently zoned CO Mixed Use District, and the applicant proposes a rezoning of the site to CO Crystal City, which corresponds with the High Office Apartment Hotel GLUP designation. Planning and policy guidance for building design and open space is provided in the Crystal City sector plan, and the next few slides outline relevant guidance and recommendations specific to the project. So the sector plan envisions a land use mix across the block with an expectation that a minimum of 40% of the block be dedicated to residential or hotel uses. Rather than establish maximum density restrictions, the plan sets the limit of what can be considered as, quote, base density. In this case, the plan identifies densities that correspond with the GLUP, above which any additional density will be required to be achieved through community benefits or tools like the Green Building Incentive Program. Although additional density can be achieved through community benefits, the total densities achievable are enforced through building form and massing guidelines, including limitations on building height, tower coverage, and building separation, in addition to sculpting parameters for towers and building tops. These guidelines represent one of the primary cornerstones for guiding redevelopment in Crystal City, and in addition to regulating densities, they seek to ensure projects achieve pedestrian-oriented design, a visually interesting skyline, and protection of adequate sunlight and air for public spaces. As shown on the previous maps, the plan identifies maximum building heights for the site at 300 feet. However, up to 2 to 3 additional stories are permitted along 23rd Street. Tower coverage expressed as a percentage of the buildable area that the upper portion of the building beyond its podium may occupy is limited to 85% of the site, with tower floors to be no greater than 30 to 35,000 square feet on a single level. Additional guidelines include defining building podiums, tower sculpting through facade stepbacks, and distinguished building tops with further sculpting and enhanced mechanical penthouse screening. The sector plan recommends 2 approaches for achieving sculpted buildings with distinct podiums, towers, and tops, a multiple setback approach and a single setback approach. The multiple approach seeks to implement a series of tower stepbacks, both vertically and across the horizontal plane of a given facade frontage as it rises to the building top. The single approach suggests that a larger step back above the podium may be pursued when the building is designed as a discrete tower. The implementation of both step back approaches relies on sensitivity to surrounding context and street typologies. Building tops are defined as the upper 2 to 4 stories of a tower, and the plan suggests that building tops should have a distinct appearance through use of window rhythm, apparent floor height, setbacks, sculpted form, or materials. Building tops are also expected to maintain a consistency and overall quality with the building facade below. Likewise, the plan states that mechanical penthouse structures should also have enhanced facade treatments of a quality and character consistent with the overall building facade. With respect to architecture, the sector plan emphasizes pedestrian scale design along street frontages with commercial frontage design guidelines such as minimum ground floor heights, encroachments over the recommended build-to line, and window transparency requirements. The plan also provides some site-specific guidance for the 223 building that includes retail frontages lining the central open space area, shown as a coordinated frontage with unifying architectural language, and future commercial street frontage along the envisioned Clark Bell Street alignment to the west. The sector plan also identifies required retail use frontages on each block, while also acknowledging necessary space for residential lobbies, building entrances, and similar elements. As noted in the previous slide, this includes retail frontage lining open space 10, which would also extend to the adjacent portion of a future Clark Bell Street. The plan identifies goals and objectives in preserving the Crystal City underground system, which provides access to additional uses and enhances each block's pedestrian connectivity, notably highlighting that the underground system will evolve in form and function as redevelopment occurs. The sector plan also identifies 2 new public open spaces, as I mentioned, that are expected to be delivered with redevelopment of the subject site, labeled as open spaces 10 and 11. Open space 10, which is known as the 23rd Street Plaza, is a large 13,000 square foot space envisioned to be framed with retail storefront and, quote, noteworthy architecture. Open space 11, which is simply described as a landscaped plaza with tables and seating for outdoor dining, is envisioned as a small 3,300 square foot space with flexibility from the exact location identified in the sector plan. So in the following slides, I will go into further details relative to building design and open space and highlight staff issues for consideration. While staff has provided a broad range of design feedback to the applicant, we identified a few areas where the proposed building form or architecture deviates significantly from the sector plan, specifically tower stepbacks and massing, definition of building tops, and the need for additional frontages with retail pedestrian oriented design. In this exhibit, areas that were identified as needing some greater tower sculpting are highlighted in red and purple, while the purple frontage indicates areas where ground floor facades should also be designed for pedestrian scale commercial frontages that border either open space or feature street conditions. Although the applicant has responded to earlier feedback providing what they're calling an alternative building design that introduce some building stepbacks above the podium, there are a few deviations remaining that represent what we would call significant issues for staff. Among those, the 223 building still does not adequately define the western building frontage that will one day front a future Clark Bell Street, both in terms of tower sculpting and design of the ground floor podium level. In addition, the building top, including the mechanical penthouse screening, is not adequately integrated as part of the overall building design or architecturally distinguished from either the central tower mass or the south and west wings of the building. An alternative massing scheme was also provided for the 2250 building, which proposes smaller step downs in tower mass for the tower wings that front 23rd Street in exchange for implementing tower stepbacks along 23rd Street and Crystal Drive. Although we believe the original design's step-down scheme was more consistent with sector plan recommendations, staff has specifically identified an issue with the asymmetrical design of this alternative proposal. That is the top floor of the southwestern wing that now we believe compromises the profile and results in inadequate sculpting of the building top and no longer presents a defined building top along 23rd Street through articulated contrast with tower floors below. In contrast, the project now incorporates retail space bordering the back of open space 10 for the 223 building as generally envisioned in the plan. As noted previously, the underground system entrance would be relocated, but this is not in conflict with the sector plan as the project would provide 2 quality access routes to the entrance, and relocation of the entrance allows building frontages and public spaces to be brought down to the sidewalk grade. As noted previously, public open space opportunities called out in the sector plan look slightly different in the proposed application. First, open space 10 is proposed at a smaller size at just over 8,000 square feet as an interim condition, which would postpone delivery of the full 13,000 square foot open space until redevelopment of the adjacent Plaza 6 site and associated final alignment of Clark Bell Street. The applicant proposes an alternative location for open space 11 by creating a public plaza connection to the underground entrance from Crystal Drive on the north side of the 2250 building. However, the applicant has revised the proposal to clarify that the entire plaza connection would therefore represent open space number 11. So this results in a total area that is significantly larger than the 3,300 square feet called for in the sector plan, and it delivers a public open space that would also be designed and constructed with this site plan development. Staff has identified one final recommendation with respect to design and delivery of the interim open space 10 condition, noting that instead of a simple lawn area, the interim design should or could contemplate some less intensive landscaping to frame the space, as well as additional or consideration of additional pedestrian paths to the rear retail frontage and to stairs that are indicated on this exhibit here with the purple arrows that provide access to the remainder of the block. So in closing, this chart highlights the previous and anticipated review schedule for this site plan application prior to the county board's consideration of the project. Following this SPRC meeting, at least one additional meeting is anticipated in September, followed by public hearings this fall. Again, please feel free to take advantage of the contact information provided here and contact me with any questions, as well as the project page link below. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cullen, for that presentation. We will now be turning to the applicant, but before we do so, I just wanted to check with Mr. Whitmore or Mr. Shulman. How many slides do you have to present?
I believe it is a fair amount. We feel comfortable we can do it in 30 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that is I will be cutting you off at that point. So, yeah. And if we need to go back to other slides you have, we can do that. But we'll pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you, James, and thank you, Michael. Eric Schulman with JBG Smith, the applicant for the project. Fauzi from our team. There we go. We'll be sharing the slide deck. I will go through the initial slides pretty quickly here, since I think staff covered the intro areas pretty well. But as a quick agenda for our portion, I'll go over section 1 pretty quickly. We'll then turn it over to the respective architects of the buildings to go over the architecture and massing, and finally to our landscape architect for the public space on the block. So just real quick on the site overview, the program, I think we're relatively familiar with the slide from LRPC and from the staff presentation. About 1,400 units between these two buildings, about 300 feet tall, 0.3 parking ratio provided partially on-site and partially off-site. Looking at the site itself, which should be the next slide. There we go. Orienting us right to the location of the site at the corner of 23rd and Crystal. Next slide. And the existing site conditions, pointing out, as staff noted, the existing vacant office building is the main component of the site today, wrapped in that colorful wrap. The one-story retail building on the corner, which has actually recently been demolished, and behind the office tower, the surface parking lot. The notable thing you can notice from that photo, as well as this image here, is the elevation change across the site, and the fact that the existing buildings are all elevated up above 23rd Street on a retaining wall, meaning the existing parking lot, site circulation, front door to the office building are all above the street and don't engage the street. So by contrast, on the next slide, you will see we are intending to correct this with the new development, providing activation and engaging the street on all sides and also throughout the site at the true street level. This is the site plan of our proposed two buildings. I think staff covered this pretty well. Just highlighting with some colors here that we have retail shown in blue, wrapping Crystal Drive and 23rd Street. As staff noted, a change from our initial proposal is adding retail space at the north end, or kind of what appears to be the backside of the big park down on 23rd Street, to be fully consistent with the sector plan. The other major change being what we're calling out as public access easement on the top of the screen, which is Sector Plan Park 11, identifying this entire space as a single easement for public open space, which will be designed and constructed all together as part of the SPRC process and the construction of the building. And then I think we just have one more slide. Before we hand it off to the architects, just kind of summarizing the two buildings as we initially proposed them. I think staff got to this point that we have proposed alternate tower massings based on some staff feedback. I think our original proposal reflected a bit of a differing view compared to staff on how our towers fit into the sector plan setback guidance with regards to whether it was kind of the multiple setback approach or the single setback. I think our initial view was these two towers were taking advantage of the multiple setback approach, given that each tower is comprised of multiple volumes that kind of step back at different spots up on the top of the building. However, we were requested to study the single setback approach, which has a true approximately 5-foot setback around the entire buildings right above the podium. I think in either case, we put a great deal of care into the design of the podium on each building to make sure there was a human scale to it, that it was differentiated from the tower above with different materials and rhythm, and having a clean horizontal break to separate the tower and podium architecturally. We also took great care in in the original scheme to make sure that the top of the buildings had a variation in heights. With existing Crystal City, all of the buildings are flat on the top and they're all at the same height as each other. So I thought it was very important to have towers that had significantly different heights at the top. I think in the alternate proposal, when we essentially squeezed the tower footprints in, some of that might have been lost. But overall, on those points, very interested in hearing the feedback from SPRC on the two massing options. Clearly, we came in with the original proposal and think that works really well. But coming into this with an open mind and really want to hear from SPRC the comments that we can combine with the staff comments and come up with a building that we hope meets everyone's desires. So with that, I will hand it off to SCB, who is the architect of 2250 Crystal.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Good evening, everyone. My name is Craig Krupitzer. I'm an associate principal at SCB and the senior designer for 2250 Crystal Drive. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview for the design of the building. So our plan starts here with the large retail space along Crystal Drive, and this has large sidewalks, wide sidewalks that provide for an active pedestrian experience. The residential entrance anchors the plan along 23rd Street, and that gives the lobby a clear and present sense of arrival for residents and the guests. A small retail space completes the block and frames the entrance to the north-south connection on the west. Bikes, loading, and underground parking access are arranged off of the north-south connection. And at the north side of the project, the east-west connection will be enhanced with access to the main retail along Crystal Drive. Next slide, please. So the overall building is a little over 300 feet tall on the north side and then steps down 60 feet to the south. The building starts with a strong 3-floor podium that responds to the pedestrian scale of the sector plan. And from there, the tower steps back on the north to provide relief along the east-west connection. The massing of the tower opens in a U shape to the south to increase daylight for the residents and provide a sunlit outdoor amenity space on the 4th floor. And the tower steps back from the south to provide a sunny pool deck and outdoor amenity space with sweeping views of the surrounding neighborhood. A signature moment on the northeast corner creates an outdoor room with dramatic monument views. The sequence of setbacks helps reinforce the building's bottom, middle, and top organization. Next slide, please. As we zoom down to the street level along Crystal Drive, the building sits on a clearly defined podium. The vision for this facade is a refined palette of rich materials, including stone and warm metal tones that frame the large retail bays. The bays are arranged in a scale to bring the comfortable pedestrian experience to the street, and the use of high-end materials and depth emphasize the active retail use and enhance the pedestrian experience. Integrated balconies above add a livable scale to the facade. And at the northeast corner, as seen here, the retail space will further activate the east-west connection and add to the vibrant urban space. Next slide, please. And as we turn the corner to 23rd Street, the residential lobby centers the facade and is bookended by the stone-clad retail bays. This creates a dramatic break in the podium. and a screen-like treatment then gives residents and guests a sense of privacy while maintaining a connection to the outdoors. And on top of this entrance is an outdoor amenity space, which brings activity and interest to the top of the podium. And here we can start to see the 4th floor set back from the podium, and that creates a feeling of lightness as the building cleanly transitions to the tower. Next slide, please. So this shows some of the materials that we're envisioning for the project. It's a composition of warm metal tones for the tower and a timeless warm stone for the podium. We have accented metallic colors and wood tones that punctuate the facade throughout, and the tower will have high performance vision glass, and the ground floor will have clear glass to maximize visibility for the retail and lobby spaces. Next slide, please. So the concept for the facade is to break down the scale of the building by creating 2 distinct skins that interlock and weave together, defining the mass. We use the seams of this interlocking to emphasize the form and incorporated balconies within the slots, giving the building a residential scale. The tower sets back on the south. That creates a strong and slender profile to the top. And the outdoor room that punctuates the northeast corner at the top of the building that you can see in this view adds a signature moment that provides sweeping monument views and bringing the energy of the street up to the sky. Next slide, please. Along 23rd Street, the tower is separated into 2 arms, creating relief in the massing and establishing rhythm and urban scale. The material palette of the podium is complemented with articulated metal panels that recall the rich material tones throughout the tower skin. The podium helps anchor the building to the corner and creating a strong presence and establishing a defining edge to the block. Next slide. And so here, here's where we start to look at some of the variations that we studied based on feedback. So the original proposal is the design is set back on the 4th floor to create a podium defining reveal. The county staff has requested a 5-foot setback at the 4th floor that would extend the full height of the tower along Crystal Drive and 23rd Street. So we studied this, and in the following slides, you'll see the massing setback above the podium, which is a 5-foot setback along Crystal Drive and 23rd Street. So now these diagrams here are showing the 5-foot setback on the right side and the area that has been displaced. We've moved up to the top of the building. The floors 1, 2, and 3 below have remained unchanged between the 2 schemes. And so these plans just represent the areas that were impacted as we shifted that area back to the 5-foot setback area and displaced it up to the top. And so it's just some side-by-side comparison renderings showing the original submission on the left, the newly set back variation on the right-hand side, and how the pedestrian experience is largely unchanged between the 2. And then the view from the northeast here shows how displacing some of that setback area up to the top on the south arms of the tower add increased height to the south side of the building, therefore diminishing part of the distinct setbacks at the top of the tower. And we have a white line there that indicates the overlay of the original proposal on top of the new one. And this side, again, as mentioned earlier tonight, represents an uneven height between the 2 arms. The south arm on the west is a slightly taller massing than the arm on the right on the east side. And then just a front view from the south elevation, again, depicting the changes and variations. And again, from the southwest, again, bringing the south end of the building up higher. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Bukevich, principal at FX Collaborative. I'm here to present 223 23rd Street. So we're going to start off with some updates on the ground floor that were already discussed by Michael. As requested by staff in the community, we have changed the plan at the ground floor to incorporate retail on the north face of the public park. You can see that in the slide. And here, taking a step back and looking at the overall organization of the ground floor, you can see we have those 2 retail spaces flanking the public lobby. The lobby has frontage along 23rd Street and a secondary entrance on the north side, with loading facing east and mail-in package rooms at the north end. Taking a look at the podium in the next slide, you can see a side-by-side comparison of how we changed the previous proposal with a two-story expression. That podium had a two-story expression with metal-clad columns and brick masonry infill at the retail. We've actually come back to an earlier design that we think is more appropriate to the pedestrian scale, and I think staff agrees to have a one-story retail pavilion with masonry cladding, and the two-story expression being more of a reveal zone between the two. And then as we come along to the west side, forming a colonnade capped with a cornice and a canopy that sort of creates a horizontal datum at the second floor. At the north end, you see we changed the expression to have the retail expression as the one story, and again, having that reveal zone before the tower starts on the third floor. One last thing we heard about this podium expression on the left side of both of these images is to wrap that retail expression around the corner. So we didn't really have renderings that showed this very clearly, but we took the one that was the most representative from our previous design on the left. And you can see on the right how that retail expression is now wrapping around the corner, going about 2/3 of the way along that frontage before allowing that retail expression to continue. Taking a look at the north side of the building, here we are at the secondary entrance. When we changed from a two-story expression to a one-story expression, we had on the left the two-story expression for that residential secondary entrance. With the change to a one-story expression, you can see here a more modest and appropriately scaled version of that secondary entrance. And then now taking a step back and looking at the overall architecture, we organized the building as an L-shaped volume with two wings, the north wing and the south wing. The south being a shorter wing, lower in height at 25 stories, with a setback at the 26th floor. The north and south wings are connected by an element we call the clip or the pin that has a different facade expression that joins these two together and allows us to rise to a greater height with mechanical bulkhead screening. And looking at it,
just want to get the applicant a heads up that you have 15 minutes remaining.
Looking at the building from the other side, you can see we've carved out loggias at the corners to lighten the expression of the building. And the enlarged facade on the right shows some of the materiality. We have glazed brick that's set in a decorative pattern in precast panels that have charcoal precast as well at the in-between. And we have a 2- and 4-story expression. The south volume has a 2-story expression, and the north has a 4. And on the north side, you can see how we've lightened the building at the top with a loggia that has eliminated every other bay to allow for greater lightness. And on the right, you can see some of the materials in detail with the glazed brick, the textured precast concrete in charcoal, and the metal panel, metal cladding for the windows and railing. Moving to the sector plan guidelines, we took these to heart, and I'll show you a few key elements. I won't get into detail on this slide given the time constraints, but going to the next slide, you can see we really wanted to pay attention to the expression of the podium per the sector plan guidelines, allowing the height to be less than 65 feet. Here at 2 stories, we're much less than that, and allowing for greater floor-to-floor heights, as you see in the next slide, with the 14 feet on the second floor and 16 in contrast to the 9'8" for the floors above. And then moving on, we wanted to provide that coordinated frontage that was mentioned. So we have at the ground floor and also above, we have frontage that faces the park that has coordinated design. And the top of the podium finally is made distinct by a horizontal datum, as you can see by this cornice line illustrated here. Moving along to the next slide. Here on the north side, we also wanted to give some distinction to the north elevation. It is a more constrained condition, but we've eliminated every other red pier as it comes down to grade and replaced it with a charcoal precast pier expression to give that a little bit more light as well. Moving to the top, we wanted to show a little more detail about the materiality of the top. The element that screens the mechanical is this louver, this kind of reverse louver that has a sort of a nice expression that creates this horizontal banding and captures the light in a very distinctive way. This precedent on the left is not our project, but we have used this on a recent project. And then at the top of we also just wanted to highlight that this meets the sector plan guidelines of having a distinct top. The top rises to a greater height. We have 3 steps in the building, creating what we think is an elegant composition, and then screening the mechanical penthouse with that metal material. Moving along to the ultimate tower massing, again, we were asked to incorporate a 5-foot setback along 23rd Street. So we've illustrated 2 versions of the 2 views of that. One, our current original massing, and the alternate massing on the right. So moving to the plan view, you can see how that it works itself out in plan. The 5-foot setback above the second floor for the tower as it rises up. And then we added a 3-foot setback on the north side of the pin or the clip because it really worked better with our modulation of the facade and the planning for the building. It also helped with the proportions. You can see here in a side-by-side comparison of the elevations. As we narrow that volume, the south volume, we do raise it up 2 more floors to make up for the lost area, and we also extend the clip 10 feet further to the south. You can see that same diagram on the east, and then moving to the 3D views. Here you can see an overlay on the current rendering on the left, and then a diagram on the right that shows how that would play itself out. And here is a side-by-side comparison showing how the alternate massing would be expressed on the right. You can see that the height differential between the 2 volumes is decreased. One element becomes wider and we think a little bit more bulky, and you'll see that in the next view as well. Here's the diagram, and the next slide shows the rendered view. The differential between the 2 volumes becomes lessened, and the pin element becomes a little bit bulkier. And then coming to the ground floor, where again, I think to mimic Craig, I think this is really where the intent of the guideline for the 5-foot setback was to improve the pedestrian scale. You can see no setback on the left, and with the 5-foot setback on the right. And the next slide illustrates the same in a frontal view. And I think the views speak for themselves. With that, I'll move to public space and circulation. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. This is Andrew Cridlin with OJB Landscape Architecture. So moving, I think we're going to just start with a recap of the Open Space 10, Open Space 11. Staff did a great job of describing, but again, an 8,000 square foot interim open space for Park 10, and then the minimum 5,000 square foot public access easement for Park 11. And the next slide shows those locations on the site plan there at the southwest corner of the 223 building and then north of the 2250 building for Park 11. This is the overall site plan, so you can see that public open space there kind of tucked into the 223 building, the north-south connection between the 2 buildings, the east-west connection is Park 11 north of 2250, and then the sort of clear and organized sidewalks around Crystal Drive and 23rd Street. Next slide. I think we go into Park 11. So just what to look at here on the top is the previous proposal, again showing that 3,300 square feet of the open space, and then the plan at the bottom is the current proposal showing a minimum 5,000 square foot public access easement for the entire open space. So the next slide, I believe, shows that in greater detail. You can see the new underground entrance. This is really intended to connect Crystal Drive through this public plaza, public access easement to that entry. The hardscape materials, so we've kind of created this pattern that starts to create this movement through the space and creating these nooks for public seating and public access and lingering through this entire zone, creating a connected plaza from Crystal Drive to the underground. I think the next slide shows some of these site features, including raised planters, integrated benching, and kind of those stairs that lead you down from the different plaza levels, and then the retail extends north of 2250. The next, I believe, is a section that shows kind of this cross section from Crystal Drive all the way through the east-west connection, kind of culminating at the end at the north-south there at the far left. And then the next is a series of images working your way, walking from east to west. So this is an image from the Crystal Drive sidewalk looking in, the retail on the left, and then those public and integrated spaces on the right and down the center. Keep going. This is 2250 on the left, and then 2200 Crystal Drive on the right with the underground entry there, kind of with the signage and the canopy there on the upper right-hand corner. And then this is a view looking back to the east from the end of the north-south connection at the 2200 underground entry. You can see that kind of open plaza there with some lawn and some flexible furnishings. Next is the north-south connection. So this is a integrated shared street, vehicular and pedestrian connections, completely curbless. Paving pattern running from one side to the other. We have 8-foot sidewalks and a 26-foot drive lane down the center. And then these planters that kind of work their way back and forth, both corresponding with entries on both buildings and also as protection for pedestrians as they move from north to south. And then it's anchored with the retail there at the south and those 2 trees that you can see in the plan. So we'll go through again a series of images. So this is kind of an overhead view. You can see the curbless design and the planters, kind of guiding pedestrians north towards the underground from 23rd Street, and then anchoring that retail in the lower right-hand corner. Next image is at the grade from this view. Again, you can see the bike room for 2250, the retail on the left for 223, and for 2250 on the right. Next image is looking from back towards 23rd Street. Again, you can see the retail and then the variety and style of planters that we're looking at. Next slide is from the end of the street at the 223 lobby entry, and then the east-west alley on the north side of the 223 building. Next slide. This goes into the phasing of Park 10. So this is in the interim phase, again, 8,000 square feet interim open space. And then the next slide shows with South Park Street coming through and the additional 5,000 square feet of open space once that redevelopment occurs. So Park 10, again, 8,000 square feet public open space. We've heard the county staff comments about providing additional movement and pathways through this space, and then some additional plantings on the north end that kind of culminate in that additional retail frontage that Joe just discussed. So I believe the next slide is a section cutting through 23rd Street through to that retail. So again, you can see kind of that sidewalk in the distance running along that raised interim condition with the wall there. We kind of have this large lawn with some plantings along the north side, and then the retail frontage there against the building. And I believe our last slide is the section cut in the other direction. You can see kind of both of those walking paths leading you back to those stairs, leading you to the retail on both ends, and creating this kind of great open space in the interim condition. So that's all we had.
Does that conclude the staff presentation?
Yes, applicant is all done.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate you moving through that quickly. So the conversation is now with the members of the SPRC. The way I'd like to handle our discussion about architecture and open space this evening is the following. I'd like to do architecture first. I'd like to start with the 2250 Crystal Drive building, and then move to the 223 23rd Street. Then I'd like to talk about open space, and then go through open space 11, open space 10, the north-south connection. So let us start then with any questions, comments on architecture for the 2250 Crystal Drive building. And a reminder to people who are members of the public, if you wish to sign up for public comment, please type that into the chat function. Commissioner Van Hine.
Hi, you can hear me okay? Yeah, I fully support the staff's recommendations to create a difference between the podium and the basic structure, the tower. What I miss with the new design is when you're looking straight at it from 23rd Street, you had a lovely T shape that came up between the two sections that came out. And when they raised those two sections that came out up, you lost that. And I think that was a really key part of the design. I also share concerns about the asymmetry of that. And I have another question about it with this, looks like a permanent kind of extension of restaurant space into the pedestrian corridor between Crystal Drive and the new entrance to the underground, because it really cuts into the space, but that's more of an open space question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Hine. Since we will be talking about the streetscape at our meeting in September, I do think we want to handle that restaurants kind of moving out into the public realm, kind of where that starts and stops. So a flag for the applicant to make sure that your street cross sections will show that, and flag for staff for our September meeting.
Yeah, I just raised it for this is an open space issue.
Correct. Yeah. So you're talking about it as in relation to the open spaces, not the streetscape.
If I may, James, there's an area that they carve out in this sort of new open space 11 area, and it's carved out specifically so there wouldn't be an access easement. It would just be part of the private property that, outdoor cafe seating area. So it's adjacent to the open space more so than it would be in the streetscape.
Good. As we're going through this, since when we come back to open space 11, might be something to touch on again, Commissioner Van Heyen. As we get there, we can bring up that in plan view, and I think that would be helpful. Commissioner Lentelme.
Yes, thank you, Chair Schroll. For this building, I actually feel that the original design is better. I don't think that the setback is sufficient to really make a big difference, other than by pushing the two wings up higher. I agree with Commissioner Van Heyen that you sort of lose something there. I'd rather have those two wings on 23rd be lower and come out a little bit closer to the street to have that more distinctive top. I don't feel that here, and I think that the way the podium presents, the architecture is done very well, that I think that having to do the further setback really doesn't gain anything more visually. It already has a really nice distinction between the podium and the tower portion. So I would actually prefer the original design. I don't think we need to apologize for the height here. I don't think that it really feels overwhelming. I think it really feels very energetic. And I would leave it as it was and lower those two 23rd Street wings somewhat. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lentelme. Commissioner Gearin.
Thank you, Chair Schroll. So I think the building looks pretty attractive, especially at the pedestrian level. I have a question about the materials, and I'm sorry, I joined a bit late, so you might have covered it. We used to get to see the materials in our meetings, and I wonder if that's something that folks will have an opportunity to see, and also examples of how well the materials will wear in our climate over time. Then I share some of the concern about the asymmetry of the design with this iteration. And I want to just confirm that you're proposing to use bird-friendly glass or other materials, or a policy that uses lights out, since we are on the migratory flyway.
If the architect could, we did cover some materiality, but we can, I think, do that if the architect for 2250, Mr. Krupiter, sorry, I'm mispronouncing your name, could speak to that. That would be helpful, and then the bird-friendly glass issue as well.
Absolutely, no worries. Yeah, so the materials, obviously, we would love to present them in person and show the actual materials. So I think in future meetings that will be the case. And as far as the bird-friendly glass, I think that that's still part of the process in which we're examining our systems and materials. Eric, if you want to.
Yeah, no, I'll echo on the bird-friendly glass. I think we got to a great spot on the 2000 and 2001 South Bell projects and integrated that. I believe it was only on the first 5 floors or so. So looking forward to that discussion as it relates to community benefits. There is a significant impact to the cost there. And I think we worked out a really great precedent at 2000, 2001 of working that into the community benefits package. So I will say that we'll keep working on that with staff.
Yeah, just a follow-up, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I understand that the way we've configured things at the county now, that's considered sort of steps that you might take for LEED certification, perhaps as a benefit. I just want to remind you gentlemen, I feel like I make this statement at all of the meetings, and JBG has been very responsive. The movement in our area in the DMV was started by architects in the district who were distressed to see birds flying into their buildings and collecting the dead birds at the base of the building every day. And so I know how invested you are in the community. So I encourage you to explore different options. I know some places simply use a lights out policy to reduce the strikes. Connie Erickson, who has attended a number of these meetings and represents Audubon Society, it would probably be happy to speak with you offline and tell you what their current best practices are so that you have some options going forward. But I appreciate your willingness to consider that. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to you both. And to Commissioner Guerin, as you said, I know you arrived late. The posted applicant presentation on slide 21 of 121 does show the material palette for this building we're talking about, as the slides for the applicant showed this evening were slightly different.
Thank you.
Yes, and then the second build, I don't know when you joined, Commissioner Guerin, but the other material palette is shown for the second building further on in the presentation. Commissioner McIntyre.
Yeah, I would actually second the importance of looking into bird-friendly class and also the lights out policy. And those actually are really two separate things because we want to think about lights out, especially during migratory period. I had one issue actually of clarification. It's not clear when the sustainability elements are going to be touched on, if there's going to be, whether this is covered in today's conversation or the next meeting, and will there be more details? Because frankly, information on sustainability is very scanty. So there's almost nothing to evaluate. And also whether the builder does plan to participate in the green building incentive policy.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre. So the sustainability issues will be handled in the September meeting. So September, I believe it's September 15th is when we'll be meeting on that. I can let the applicant speak to its participation in the green building incentive program. I believe that they are building a LEED gold building, but they're not pursuing bonus density on this site, but we can let the applicant clarify that. Mr. Schulman?
Yes, that's generally correct. For a little more background going back in time, the site is part of the Crystal City PDSP from 2020, which had a LEED silver commitment for all the buildings. So we're proposing to exceed that with a LEED gold commitment. As James mentioned, would not be participating in the green building incentive program and not, getting any of those bonus density credits. But look forward to working with staff on the LEED gold commitment and other details as it relates to modifying the PDSP.
Yeah, because it really, the commitments so far that I can see are well below what's in the green building incentive policy and really isn't climate friendly for the future. So would look forward to seeing a lot more details on that. In terms of the building and the building massing, I'd be interested in knowing what the architects have done in terms of orientation, building envelope, and other strategies to make the building as energy efficient as possible from a building envelope technique.
Does the applicant want to speak to that quickly now? I mean, we will be, again, Ms. McIntyre, addressing the sustainability issue at our next meeting.
Yeah, but that is really part of building density and how the building is designed. It was very clear with the Amazon building how they were using the design to make it as highly energy efficient as possible.
Yeah, I can speak high level, and Craig, feel free to jump in. The U shape on the 2250 building, the primary facade, facing south, where where the heat gain would be the largest, has the least amount of glass. It has that more solid kind of metal panel rhythm. The north side can be achieved with less solar heat gain, is where we see the much glassier portion of the building. So I think we did take it to heart there. The 223 building, I don't know if the architect has anything to add there, but I think that building massing was pretty much set by where the sector plan calls for the park. So I don't think there was a ton of creativity we could employ there, but would defer to SCB and FX to talk in more detail.
Sure. I'll just add on to what you just mentioned, Eric, where we really took an analyzation of the facade area and the glazing area and the ratio of glass to solid, and you really get your biggest bang for your buck when you reduce glass. So we're really honed in on reducing the amount of vision glass that's susceptible to the heat gain, while maintaining the look and feel for the type of building.
My chat doesn't work, and I'd like to speak. Thank you. I think I saw the comment period.
Dr. Byrne, we will put you down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Krupitzer.
Sure. And that's pretty much it. We're first point is to tackle the ratio of glass to solid, get that into the sweet spot, and utilizing high quality glass, which already comes with a pretty effective solar heat gain coefficient. We're continuing to refine our facades for that.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Freshman.
I'd like to return to the architecture and associate myself with Commissioner Lantomi's remarks. I think that generally speaking, the trade-off for on the podium that is in my mind guidance from the sector plan as opposed to height, which is not at all flexible. I think from at the street level, there isn't really any difference for the pedestrian, but I think the bulk of the towers dramatically is different, and the treatment of the tops in both buildings is dramatically treatment. So I would support the original designs. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Freshman. Mr. Devanzo.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I have a question both for applicant and for staff. For staff, I have a question about how this project relates to the Crystal City Heights study, which theoretically I know it has been paused for a while, but had the goal of responding to feedback with a desire for more variation in the heights and architectural styles at the tops of buildings in Crystal City, which the second variation, the alternate proposal, does not do. And even the first one, I think these are two pretty similar height buildings. So clarification about that. And then for the applicant, my question is about the impact of the alternative plan on floor plans and whether or not it would kind of necessitate smaller apartments or reduction from 2-bedroom to 1-bedroom or even 2-bedroom to 2-bedroom, that sort of thing. And because if so, that would certainly be a concern, but it'd be good to clarify.
Thank you. Mr. Devanzo, staff want to speak to the first, Mr. Matusik?
Yeah, happy to do that. Good evening, everyone. Matt Matusek with the Planning Division. One of the things that Mr. Devanzo was alluding to was a preliminary recommendation in the Crystal City Building Heights Study, which is on pause but should be resuming this fall, was an intentional effort to address and possibly correct elements of the sector plan that to date we've rarely seen in a lot of the applications that have come forward, particularly along Crystal Drive, but in several locations where the anticipated guidance with respect to tower step backs was not being realized. And in some cases, rather than a step back, we were seeing a cantilever. And I think from a pedestrian perspective, receiving light and air into the streetscape environment was site by site being lost in the greater architectural conversation. So seeing the pattern of multiple projects kind of moving beyond that guidance and not really implementing it in the way I think that was intended in the sector plan, we were using the Crystal City building height study to see if perhaps in the discussion of sites where additional height beyond what's already in the sector plan is up for debate, we can potentially reinforce that earlier guidance to make sure that as buildings get taller, they are more successful, I think, implementing those step backs and making sure that the sculpting of the actual building is being achieved. Now, bringing that argument to the site in question with Plaza 5, this, along with several other segments in the Crystal City, are technically not subject to the Crystal City building height study because they are already achieving the maximum that's permitted and likely that the FAA would allow anyway in this segment. So the 300-foot, ceiling, if you will, is not something that the Crystal City building height study would be surpassing, and therefore sites like this one, which are already maximizing the height, are not really being discussed in terms of recommendations. We're looking at some of the other sites that have not reached their ultimate height, and there's a potential delta between where the sector plan restricts height and where the FAA may permit something acceptable. So we are not really focusing on these two particular buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Matusek, for that detailed explanation. Mr. Schulman, would you like to speak to how the alternatives can, for 2250, change unit mix, floor layout?
Yeah, we haven't done a very deep dive on that. We have done a shallow dive at that. But we wouldn't expect to see a major difference in the unit mix or average unit size between the original and the alternate massing. The alternate massing, does have slightly smaller floor plates. They're a little shallower. So if anything, I might expect the alternate to have slightly smaller average unit size. But in all honesty, wouldn't expect it to be all that different between the two.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cullen?
I just want to sort of expand a little bit on what Matt was saying too, just specific to this site. One thing I don't know that was entirely clear is that, the two building massing alternatives that were shown, they're both the same general density. They're both at 12.0 FAR. So, while staff feels that the sector plan recommendation is pretty specific about a tower step back from the podium level, in our view, it's not to say that you need to offset that with additional height of some of the lower tower elements. We just sort of take that in concert with all the other recommendations as what guides the overall, achievable density of the building. So we're not necessarily advocating for taller wing heights or taller portions of the building, but we do think that those step backs are fairly critical for just achieving that pedestrian friendly feel from the sidewalk level.
I appreciate that, Mr. Cullen. All right, so I'd like to now move us to the architectural discussion of 223 23rd Street. So any questions, comments, feedback, perhaps things for next time on 223 23rd Street. Commissioner Lentelmi.
Thank you, Chair Schroll. For this building, I actually feel the opposite. I think the new alternative is improved because I think the proportions are much better with the little bit of the setbacks that are being added onto it. I think it gives better verticality to the southern wing of the building. So I definitely support that. I do like the changes at the ground level. I think they also look quite good. I think overall, it's a very good looking building. The only thing I'm concerned about is the screening for the mechanical stuff at the top of the tower. It looks, the rest of the building has nice detail, it looks quite good. that screen is maybe a little too industrial or a little too plain. It is the tower portion and it's going to be pretty prominent. I'm wondering whether something more could be done with it compared to the rest of the building, which is a very, I think, a very sophisticated design that looks quite good. Those are really my only comments for this building. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lynn. Tell me your good feedback on rooftop appurtenances. Does the applicant wish to respond at all to that feedback, particularly this kind of screening of mechanical equipment?
Yeah, I can hand it off to Joe.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think the materiality is one thing that we're exploring. I think the next level will be looking at the detail of that and maybe trying to incorporate a little bit more of a patterning or something like that. So we hear what you're saying, and I think we can take it under advisement and try and get into the details. And I think that's where we'll be able to make this sign as well as lighting potentially. It is the one thing I will say is we are challenged by the FAA height limit, as well as there's not a lot of room within that space to fit all the mechanical equipment we do need to fit. So.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think as I was interpreting Commissioner and tell me, it was more the manner in which you were screening it, and maybe not necessarily the height, but it's more the color and palette and design of that, as opposed to it needed to be taller or it wasn't screened insufficiently in that way. But Commissioner, tell me.
That's exactly right. I have no concern about the height of it whatsoever, or the need for it at all. In fact, I think it's a feature that it goes up that high, so that's great. It's that the materiality of it, the design of it, just doesn't match the sophistication of the rest of the building. That's my only comment.
Thank you.
Good. We'll appreciate that, and appreciate that you're taking a look at that, and we'll hopefully see some different options next time. Commissioner Van Hine.
Yes, a mixed comment about the columns on the first stage outside of the retail. On one hand, it breaks up the pedestrian passageway around the building, but on the other hand, am I right that it creates a barrier for rain? So you can actually walk next to the building, and there's this cover over the columns that'll prevent us from getting rained on?
Can we
Or is
pull
that
up
open or what?
a slide to depict this?
I can, Eric, if you would like.
Yeah, because I think, Pam, if we look at the view that's kind of standing at one corner of the park looking back towards the building, that's, I think, if I understand the question, that you we're talking about.
It's working now. There. I think you're talking about this view.
Yeah, so you have the columns and the kind of roof over the columns actually will provide a rain barrier if you're walking along there?
Along this, from 23rd Street to the lobby entrance, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And around the corner as well.
Yes.
As you, yeah. I think that's a wonderful feature, and I wish we had more of that in our area, especially as we seem to be getting more and more rain. So thank you for that. I think that's great.
Okay. I don't know how to stop presenting. Oh, there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Hine. Any other feedback on this second building, second tower? People generally in agreement with Commissioner Lantelmi? Do people like the alternative? Do they like the initial option? Commissioner Van Hine.
Yeah, I totally agree with Commissioner Lantelmi. It's the second version is better, and do something more with the top. But yeah, it's fine.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Van Hine. Well, as a former commissioner once said, if you agree, I don't need to hear from you, but if you disagree, I need to hear from you. So I'm interpreting silence at this point as agreement with Commissioners Van Hine and Lintelmi that the alternate version with the kind of modifications we're discussing with the architect are amenable to folks here on the SPRC and folks in the neighborhood. So if that's what I'm hearing, then we can move on to the open space discussion. We can move on to open space 11. So let's move on to that. If we could maybe pull up a good plan view diagram, at least for our base discussion, that would be good. Do we have one that has, well, this is good at least to get us started. I think we might have questions about cross sections and clear distance and things like that, but okay. Any questions, Commissioner Lintelmi?
Not so much questions as comment. I think this is a really good idea, having this easement, this public access easement along here. It helps break up the block. It allows pedestrian access. I think it'll be a fitting way to get in and out of the underground. A very attractive way. I think it might actually help encourage more use of the underground, because it looks like it, if it's designed properly, and it looks like it might be, it'll be very inviting to pedestrians to walk up into it from Crystal Drive. So I think that's, it just increases the circulation for the interior of this super block. I think it's a much better use of open space than what would have been in the sector plan, having that open space on the corner of Crystal Drive and 23rd. So I'm very much in favor of this. I think it'll be a great public amenity, and it will be very useful too. Again, if it's designed right, that it draws people in.
Thank you, Commissioner Lintelmi. Commissioner Van Hine.
Yes, this is much improved from what we've seen before. My comment again is this private kind of cafe zone that's up in the corner. I think it really narrows the space, so it's going to be harder for people to move around, and it makes entering the space less inviting. And we want people to be welcome, to realize that this is a public space, and what you see here when you get up here, this is a private area right there. My question is, what are those boxes? There's 3 boxes that are kind of on top of this cafe zone. And that's it for my questions and comments on this.
Yeah, I can speak to the boxes and the other comment if that works. The boxes are just an overlay with Dominion Power access below grade to some vaults. We've done these pretty successfully elsewhere, where the pavers and other materials are integrated into the lift out panels, so there shouldn't be any aesthetic impact unless you're really looking for the specific seams. But we just need to be careful not to place any permanent structures like trees or something like that would block the access. And to clarify on the outdoor dining area, the intent is to make it more inviting to be able to walk into the space by having activity on the edge of the corner, kind of to draw people in and be activated. It was one of the sector plan visions for the space, was to be activated with adjacent outdoor retail space. I believe we have a dimension version of this plan somewhere. It might not be in this presentation, but we might have posted it online. I believe we have 20 or 25 feet of clear pedestrian space outside of it. So we think there should be sufficient room there. And I think the other benefit we saw to putting the outdoor dining here was giving more room on the sidewalks on the streets themselves. I know we're always kind of limited on the sidewalk zones themselves, and there's often a fight for space between the sidewalk, the trees, and outdoor dining, and allowing these retail spaces to have kind of a dedicated zone off the sidewalk seemed to kind of give us an easier time on the sidewalk. So that was the thought there, that this little zone, as Michael from staff noted, would be carved out from the access easement and really not, infringing on the promised square footage, while still providing the activation, and then also providing plenty of opportunity for true public outdoor seating of various typologies across from and adjacent to, as you walk down, the east-west connection.
Yeah, if I could just maybe expand on our staff's position, I would say too, again, we agree, and the sector plan does specifically call for outdoor dining as part of this open space in its description. And I think given the fact that the overall area that's being provided is larger than what was envisioned, and as was noted, this is actually the widest point of that open space. We haven't identified that as a concern. I mean, the alternative would be that the access easement would include the outdoor dining space, but then the applicant would then have to come back in with a use permit application. So it would still be possible to have outdoor dining in this exact location with an access easement over it, but we didn't think it was necessary, given its consistency with the sector plan.
Those are helpful comments. Thank you. We still need to encourage people to come in, though.
And I think the applicant does have a rendering of this that does have the cross-section dimensions. What is posted online is slightly different than your version. The online version is, I believe, slide 75. But so Commissioner Van Hine, if you want to look at that, or if the applicant wants to bring that up, but their version of that, yeah, this is good as well in plan view, and there's also some renderings. All right, Commissioner Devanzo, or Mr. Devanzo.
I'm only a Mr. So I agree with Pam. Maybe you don't need to change the dining, but I think there is a need to make this feel like a park, right, and not a alleyway. And of course, you all have landscaping, but you got a nice alleyway. So I figured I'd offer some suggestions, and I have the question as well that I'll end with. But I think you can definitely will need some wayfinding, like ideally at both ends. You would have a park, it would be a named park, and you'd have, park name here sign that makes it clear that it's a park and that it's a park and people are welcome. Including potentially the lighting, like taking the lighting that you have on the north-south connection and bringing it over in here might be something to consider. And an even elevated way would be to add potentially like a water feature, like, this is a long park. You could have a water feature going from one side to the other, like a stream, to add some real biophilic element to it, or think about what public art opportunities there are to really kind of do some placemaking here. So it's not just kind of a place to walk through, but rather, the purpose of the park is a place to be. And so I'd be interested in that. And then I'm interested in the stairs that go into the underground and how accessibility works with those, and kind of why they're necessary versus just, whether it'd be possible to achieve it through a grade change or anything like that, whether the stairs are necessary.
Yeah, so I see Andrew unmuted himself too. I can go really quickly, and then Andrew maybe can provide some more details.
Sure.
The reason that the stairs are necessary as we go from the right side of the screen to the left, if you're on 23rd Street today, right, there's a grade change, and the grade gets a little higher by a few feet as you walk west on 23rd Street. So that grade is mirrored here just because we have to meet the north-south connection and be a little taller. The elevation of the underground is the actual Crystal Drive grade. So those stairs are just to make up those few feet. The intent was, if you take the basically northernmost pathway on the screen, I don't think I can move my cursor and mouse over it. Fauzi, I don't know if you can, but that is kind of the accessible flat way to get through the connection to the underground. And the intent would be it's fully visible, and you can, it feels like part of the space. It's not a separate ramp, and that people would also be using that as the most direct route to get to the underground and to access some of the other retail, and that the stairs would just be an alternative way to cut across the site.
Mr. Devanzo, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know. It's just, I'd be interested to know. Yeah, I guess it is. I don't have any great alternatives or anything like that to offer. It's just always too bad, right?
Yeah,
When you kind of have stairs and
yeah, see if it could
break up the space.
And I think you can see in our renderings too, we really did try to make it seem like, you know, this is all integrated and kind of a purposeful design instead of, you know, just a assigned set of stairs going down. And I think we came up with a really good solution there, but we'll certainly keep exploring and make sure that as we advance the design that, you know, it's certainly all integrated together.
Thank you. Before I go to Ms. Freshman, just one piece of feedback from me is that as we're considering the dimensions of the kind of clear width through Park 11, a number of these do show the kind of full width, and they don't do it in this one, but they in their renderings, you know, you have 22 feet or 16 feet for the kind of width of the space, but that includes often tables and chairs and other things that are there. So I think it'd be helpful to not just show the full width, but what we think envision that clear width to be as well, which might be 12 feet in some places and it might be larger in others. But I think knowing that outside of where you're envisioning additional tables and chairs would be helpful. Ms. Freshman.
I first agree with Commissioner Schroll's comments, and I would really, just to pick nits, I would prefer not referring to this as a park. I think it's going to be largely in shade and largely paved, and I think it's a really important east-west connector in the mega block, but I don't see it as a park. And I'm curious as to what the process is or who will be in charge of designing it and who will pay for maintaining it. Thanks.
Does county staff want to handle that one? So either Mr. Cohen or
Sure. Yeah, and Max may want to jump in as well. As far as the process for designing it, we are in the middle of it. This is the process, and you know, we would obviously work out specifics in the site plan conditions, but I think the expectation would be that this would be a space that's maintained by JBG. And you know, one of the condition requirements would be to provide the county the public access easement for this space.
Max?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I there's nothing really more to add to that. We're requesting that the applicant fund, design, and maintain this space, and kind of collectively through these processes, through the SPRC and other engagements that we've had, kind of figuring out the design as we kind of go along and seeing what works, what concerns are, and how to troubleshoot things to make this space feel as welcoming as possible.
So it is safe to say that this the design of this park will accompany the SPRC as it goes to the county board, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So
go ahead. You know, again, the design, the drawings associated with the 4.1 drawings that are submitted, that would then become the guiding document as the applicant pursues, you know, building permits and as this is constructed, but it would be constructed with the overall project.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Cullen. So we have heard some detailed feedback tonight about a variety of suggestions. So if members, particularly of the surrounding neighborhood, have additional feedback, please send it to staff, but please also kind of engage the applicant of that. And if there's more comments this evening, this is why we're trying to do this at the first meeting, so that there's an opportunity to see revisions at meeting 2 in September, as this will be part of, this will be designed as part of this process, and won't be a separate park design process. Any other comments on or feedback or questions about park or open space 11? Okay. Let us move then to open space 10. The applicant would not mind pulling up, I believe you have a good rendering of it from the kind of corner of the site. Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yeah, for this one, here's the concerns I have. I agree with the idea that it be something you can see all the way through. I think that's going to be critical to the success of having that retail that's way set back there. Perfect. So you have to be able to see that it's there in order for people to walk through. My concern is it's just a giant lawn, and I really don't want to see a giant lawn. I think that's the way we're not going when it comes to green space, open space. Given that these are residential towers here, what it's going to happen is this is going to be the dog run. That's all it's really going to be. So you're not going to be able to really want to use it for anything else. So unless you have unless you don't mind it turning into that, I'd rather see it be more sophisticated landscaping for this, using low bushes, native ground cover, something like that, that would give it more visual interest, would be more ecologically friendly, because lawns really are just essentially green deserts. And at the same time allows people walking along 23rd Street to see that there is something to go to at the other end of this open space. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantelmi. Commissioner McIntyre.
I would agree with Commissioner Lantelmi, and actually this is the general observation of all the parks and open spaces of the project is they're pretty stark. They're really not biophilic. So I think there's a lot more opportunities to put in more biophilic elements, maybe a tree, shrubs, plants that would make it, and then maybe create, smaller spaces for people to sit and relax. And the other thing you have to consider is with, increasingly hot summers is creating some shade for people to cool off the area. Mm-hmm. Especially with a lot of the concrete in some of the areas.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre. Mr. Whitmore, I see your hand was raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure as we talk about this, that we've level set everything properly, that, this park is going to be, as shown, is going to be an interim open space, right, before the future final open space is built. It's not to say it's not important. It's not to say that it's not something we ought to talk about, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware that this isn't the final forever condition.
Right. So
yeah,
I
fully took that into account, and that's why something, low ground covers, ferns, ferns don't work in bright sun like this, but something like that, rather than simply a lawn, which is really nothing more than a green desert that needs water and needs all sorts of care, and it just isn't going to work. Yeah, this is interim, and that's why I would not advocate putting trees on it, because they'll have to be cut down, and that gets everybody upset. There's no point to that. But it could certainly be done much better than it is just a lawn for even for an interim condition.
Thank you, Mr. Whitmore, and for Mr. Lantelmi. Go now to Mr. Dowell.
Oh, yes, hi, thank you. I do like that the retail's been added to the north end of the site, but of the open space, but it worries me that because it has a break in the retail along the east side, it's going to be, I would see us having trouble activating and keeping that retail site going because it's going to be hard to pull people in there from the 23rd Street site. So it kind of feels like something has to happen, either make the retail continuous along the east side, or something's going to have to happen with the design of that park to pull people in there. Otherwise, it's just going to become a lonely space. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reaction from staff or the applicant on that question, or that feedback? And then I want to go to Mr. Ewert because I did see he had his hand raised.
I think it might be a good idea to let the applicant sort of expand on maybe their thinking for their retail programming. But I'll just point out that the sector plan technically does show that area that on the east side as retail frontage. However, it does sort of leave some room for residential lobby space, so it's not inconsistent. But yeah, it's certainly a good discussion topic.
Yeah, and in terms of retail programming, we did have those concerns about the activation, which was one of the reasons we initially did not propose it as retail. We did some more thinking, we've talked to the market a little bit. We think there are certain uses that could do well here that don't necessarily rely on regular day-to-day foot traffic, such as fitness users that maybe could even take advantage of the adjacency to the park and occasionally activate the park with outdoor fitness classes, or community serving retail, such as dry cleaners or other things that folks in the community would seek out and need to go there. In the long term, right, this eventually becomes kind of a corner. When Clark Bell Street comes in, it would be a primary frontage. So I think the intent would be, if we went with more of a community serving dry cleaner, that's clearly not I don't think anybody would imagine that long term as the prime park frontage, but that in the eventual state when Clark Bell comes through, this could be a really, really great spot for a cafe or something like that fronts both the street and the park. But yeah, we think in the interim there are a variety of retail uses that could do well here.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ewert,
yeah,
I think
I'll jump in.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I just kind of wanted to, there are a couple things. I think some of the commissioners have really hit the nail on the head as far as like what this space kind of needs. It does need to be activated, and we've been in contact with the applicant to just make sure that they're aware that these concerns were likely to come up, and that the interim space will need to be designed and programmed in a way that really does cater to kind of supporting those, not supporting, but kind of like working cooperatively with those retail spaces as well. One thing that I do want to add is that just as far as like timeline goes, that this is going to be an interim space, and then that we have plans for that align with construction, or at least planned construction down the line for future park master planning efforts and construction. That will be a process led by the Department of Parks and Recreation. So this will not be the last that folks see of the 23rd Street Park, and just wanted to make sure that that was explicitly stated.
Great, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Van Hine.
Thank you. I agree with comments so far, and I thank people for their comments. One thing I would suggest adding to your space is lawn furniture, which you can reuse as necessary later. I am curious what the time frame is for this interim space. Are we talking 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? That would be a determining factor on how we would want to populate it. And my final question is, I think I read somewhere that in the sidewalk space that heads on the west side of the building, that there was a potential connection to a staircase that would go to the ground above. Did I imagine that, or is that something that is happening? And I think that's a great idea.
Mr.
Yeah.
Ewart?
Yeah, really quickly, I'll hop in as far as timeline goes. Recently approved by the county board, the CIP, we identified FY25 for planning for this, for the permanent public space. So not decades, but not next year. So but we have a kind of a light at the end of the tunnel for when this will be happening.
And on the stair, you were not imagining that. You can maybe just barely make it out on the very left there. We had a closer rendering in the online package, but I think we cut it out of this one for time. But there is a stair there that gets you to the higher grade, where there is some, green space and trees up there, kind of directly north of the site, and then directly west is kind of the parking lot of the We Live building and kind of a connection out to Clark Street. The stair is required for firefighter access, as the road up there currently is the fire access for the site. So there are some constraints to work around with regards to that. But otherwise, we do imagine, when there's not a fire emergency, that the general public could be using those stairs to cut across the block.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Mr. Devanzo on his feedback, and then I'd like to move on to the north-south connection. Mr. Devanzo.
Thanks. So Commissioner Fontana is right on that this will be a dog park. If you do not plan against otherwise, it's just unfortunately how things go here. It will become a pretty unusable space because of the waste. I actually recommend you might want to think about that. It's off camera on this picture. I don't think you all included in your renderings, but that kind of exposed space that the street shift, the change in the street will do kind of to the west, maybe make that into an interim dog run or something like that. That is one option to address this, or a dog run even in the park. I think if you're going to have any sort of lawn elements, even with furniture, even with plantings, it's going to be a dog park unless you provide an alternative or have really strict enforcement. My other comment is, this doesn't have come up, but I don't know if this is anything to be done about it, but I just express it as kind of a disappointment that in the final vision, part of what is counted as this open space is kind of a strip of land to the north and west of the building, I guess where the stairs sort of are now, that is counted as park space. And that kind of just seems like it'll be just like a planting zone along this freeway, not park space. And so I just kind of wanted to say that it feels kind of odd to be calling a small piece of, whatever it'll be in the end, along Clark Bell, and the final condition to actually be part of the fulfillment of this park. But in general, I do agree with other comments that just having this bare lawn here is not going to work for the retail. It's not going to work for the neighborhood. And so encourage some creative thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Devanzo, and for all the feedback on Open Space 10. It seems like there's a consensus that more needs to be done here, and that what is shown right now is insufficient to kind of meet surrounding neighborhood needs at its location. Can we move on to the open space, or the north-south north-south connection? The applicant can bring up a good vision or version of that. And then would welcome feedback, questions, concerns, and feedback on the north-south connection. All right, sorry, folks. I think I got disconnected for a moment, so thank you for bringing up the north-south connection. Commissioner Van Hine and then Commissioner Lentelme.
Hi, a comment or two comments or questions. I like having the circular lights above as a way of lighting the space. So that way you don't have to provide street lights and take up more valuable space that we need for other things. And I'm questioning why the travel lanes are 13 feet wide. That seems awfully wide. Could they be narrower, and then we could have more space for pedestrians? Thank you.
Thank you. Can the applicant speak to the dimensions of the street there?
Yes, you can speak to that. The dimensions needed to be that large to accommodate the truck turns into the loading docks. I believe we had posted that online. I don't know if we have a chance to bring it up right now, and I don't want to slow us down. But we can distribute that and make sure we bring it up at the next meeting. It's basically those truck turning movements. Just to have the turning radius work, the lanes needed to be, about 13 feet on each direction.
Since we're going to be doing transportation and some more on that and streetscape at the next site plan meeting in September, Mr. Schulman, if you and your team could make sure to have the auto turns and we can have a full understanding of what vehicles are going to be utilizing this space and how they can operate. Commissioner Lentelme.
Yeah, since we're going to talk about transportation in the next one, I won't get into a longer discussion on this. I'll just focus on the design, which I think is the right way to go, having it be curbless, having it not be asphalt, just asphalt slapped down, but rather have pavers, have a design to the pavement. I think that will naturally slow the cars and trucks that go on it, and make it more inviting to pedestrians to come through. So, I think that's the right way to go. At 23rd Street, will that be, the sidewalk be continuous across it? So it looks more like a driveway apron rather than a street going through? That's the one question I do have. I would advocate for that, by the way, and not have it be a simple street, but have the sidewalk be continuous along 23rd. Thank you.
Yeah, let us explore that. I think we might have shown it a couple different ways as I look at the different images, and we were just working through. There's a Dominion vault lid that goes here, but I believe, Andrew, you're on. I think the intent is to have a continuous sidewalk as we see here.
Yeah, I think the images here show that. I think the plan probably shows it in contrast. I think we had gone back and forth, but I think we've landed on the continuous sidewalk through in an apron, and then the pavers start north of that.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll make sure we show that more clearly for the next meeting.
Great, thank you. Ms. Freshman.
Yeah. One thing that's come up in other discussions is whether or not this is a street or an alley, just what the references are. And I'm assuming that it's private and maintained and controlled by JBG. And when we get to the transportation also, to look at the east-west piece of it that goes behind the 223 building, and how the traffic movements will work on there. Eventually, perhaps that's going to go to Clark Bell, but in the meantime, is it a turnaround? Is it parking? What happens back there too? Thanks.
Mr. Cullen, do you want to handle that? I don't know if we have anybody from DES Transportation.
We don't, and I think that may be something that we could address more fully at the next SPRC. I know that question came up at LRPC, and because that space, I don't even know what to call it, like the alley drive space at the back of the building has been shown differently across different drawings by the applicant. So, maybe they want to expand a little bit more in their current thinking. But I agree that there should be maybe some more details provided at the next meeting.
Yes, we can provide more details. The main intent, I believe that one of the very first 4.1 submissions might have shown that generically as some type of color like green. I think since the acceptance, we've been showing it consistently, though I do think different images that have gotten out into the public might have had, the older versions, which is confusing. The intent, Judy, you're correct, right? Eventually this space connects through to Clark Bell. I think similarly to what we talked about in the interim open space, we wanted to make sure, first and foremost, we don't propose any trees back here, since they would eventually need to come out to make that roadway connection, and also being uncertain of how and when the connection would land, making sure we don't do anything too permanent. So the intent is short-term parking, which we can get into in more detail in the next meeting about transportation, but to try to take some of the Amazon delivery, quick unloading and loading that a resident might do when moving in and out, things like that, and try to move those uses back into the block and off of the main streets to make the traffic circulation better.
Great, thank you. Ms. Freshman, anything?
Yeah, I just meant to ask that I'm sure this will come up the next time, but what the relationship is between the timing of these projects going forward and the improvements for 23rd Street, and if one precludes the other. Thanks.
I can speak briefly to that as well. We're working with staff. The intent is they would go hand in hand. These projects cannot move forward until the road is shifted, since part of the building sites for these buildings exist within the current roadway at 23rd Street. So the road would need to be moved first. The significant element to that is some utility connections, most notably a large storm line that runs under the road that would need to be moved out of the way before construction on these projects could start. So we are working with county staff. I think we are hopeful that the outcome will be that JBG Smith might coordinate and kind of do all of the work to make sure it goes seamlessly as fast as possible and hand in hand. But those projects would need to go together. And then I think the benefit to the community would be that the construction work would happen all at once. When the buildings are done, it would also mean that 23rd Street is completely done. And we have the new bike lanes, new trees, new sidewalks and landscaping kind of all up and down 23rd. And we have the new buildings, and the street is finished off once and for all.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Schulman and Ms. Freshman for that question, for flagging things for next time. Okay, any other questions, comments on this north-south connection? This is something that we will revisit next time. Okay. I'd now like to go to public comment. My understanding is I think we have one person for public comment, and it's Dr. Byrne. Dr. Byrne?
Yes, hello. I have a number of comments about this. First of all, my biggest concern is not biophilic. There's really a lot of pavement, mowed grass, lawns, as you've all commented, and this is simply not biophilia. I would first like to start off by saying, look at the 4.1 submission, which has conceptual land use plan. The conceptual land use plan doesn't really say what it is. It says what the plantings are. It says 4 different planting types. That's it. Apparently, they expect to do this in the final plan, which will be submitted after the county board considers the item. This is not good. The public has to review this before the county board does. Some of these pieces can be invasive, etc. Therefore, the planting plan needs to specify those plants. Since the County Board has a monarch pledge to increase monarchs, butterflies, it should include common milkweed, a lot of it, because that's the only milkweed, it's Asclepias syriaca it's called. That's the only plant that monarch butterflies feed on and prosper on in natural areas. You must have that in there, and that should be specified. And I hope you have that in they added that to your 4.1 submission before it comes to the site plan committee next time. Park number 2 will have a large lawn, which is sterile and will create stormwater runoff. Needs pollinator plants that will support pollinators for lead gold. Also, you do not plant grasses there. You plant things for pollinators only. That's very important. Park 11, again, too much impervious pavement, mostly paved with a lawn at one end. Again, needs more pollinator plants. These should be specified, including milkweed, no grasses. North-south connection. Well, we've had a lot of comment about that one. That looks like a 20-foot wide truck lane, whatever. I'm sure the trucks can turn at the end of at the end rather than the middle. But again, too much pavement. Needs pollinator plantings. There is just too much impervious surface. This should have very few lawns. I mean, lawns are simply sterile. They're just not. This is the old way of thinking. That's why you have so many lawns around the county, particularly in parks. We don't need these here. And other people have said that, but you may need lawn areas because you do like to have some recreation, but most of it should really be pollinator plantings with lots of milkweed.
Thank you, Dr.
But please give us that 4.1 which and tell us what the species are and where they're planted on all levels.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. I believe that concludes our public comment. I think I want to turn it back over to Mr. Cullen just to remind us about next steps before we conclude this evening.
Sure. So as I sort of outlined in our presentation, our next, and I think you mentioned, James, the next SPRC is anticipated to be September 15th. And we will be covering transportation and parking, construction measures, as well as community benefits. And that would include going into some more detail about the green building program for these 2 towers. Again, as was mentioned, any feedback can be provided to us in the interim until that meeting. I think there was a lot of good discussion today, and I think as far as on our side, we'll be coordinating with the applicant to sort of go through that feedback and look for opportunities to implement it. That's all I have.
Great. Well, thank you to staff and the applicant and members of the SPRC and public who joined us tonight. As Mr. Cullen noted, please send feedback our way if you have it. Our contact information is included at the end of staff's presentation, which is posted on the SPRC website. And Mr. Cullen's contact info is also available on the SPRC webpage. Thank you again. We're all off in August, but looking forward to seeing you all in September to continue discussion on transportation and green building and other issues regarding this project. So thank you. Have a nice summer. Stay safe.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.